Hello. I'm joined in conversation today with Nathalie Regniers. She is Product Marketing Director with Infor. Nathalie, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you tell us what you do and how people use your solution?
Right. So I'm part of a company called Infor. We are the third largest enterprise software provider in the world. And basically we offer our customers solutions that go all the way from ERP down to CRM, PLM, SCM, basically all the solutions that they need in order to run their companies. And we do that in a way that we focus on industries. So our solutions contain industry-specific functionalities so that it's very easy and fast to implement.
You kind of straddle the gulf between the enterprise vendor and the best of breed, don't you? It sounds like a bunch of best of breed solutions are just sort of presented in an enterprise offering. Would that be correct?
It is, and what we're trying to do right now is we are actually pulling these all together in industry-specific packs where you have Infor food and beverage, for example, where literally you have all the solutions that you need within that solution pack in order to drive your company all the way from ERP down to your HR management and financial management, for example.
So is there a lot of differentiation? Is there a lot of customization that's required between all these verticals?
Yes, there is. A healthcare company, for example, will need to look much more with regards to what happens in hospitals, the beds that need to be filled, etc., compared to a food and beverage company where they really are going to look at shelf life, formulations for building their products, etc., as a very easy example.
Okay, the theme of this conference is the supply chain of the future. How do you see that?
Well, if you look at today's world, we're looking at a world where there's rising complexities, there's rising uncertainties as well, both in the economy as on a political level. And also the market changes, the market conditions change, as well as the customer requirements. So when you look at a supply chain, in order for a company to stay competitive, they really need to make sure that they can meet all those changes. Really what the supply chain of the future is, it really needs to be an agile supply chain that can easily adapt to all those changes, that is reviewed on a regular basis and often even redesigned on a regular basis in order to meet those changes moving forward. And it needs to be an optimized, collaborative supply chain so that it can really react really quickly and not just cut out costs wherever they can.
Seems like one of the big challenges of the supply chain of the present, let alone the future, is that of big data. Handling data, not being totally submersed in it. Is that a challenge for your clients, and how do you address that so the clients know exactly which data to use and to not be immersed in stuff that doesn't concern them?
Well, what we try to do with our solution is we really try to offer them in context BI. So literally, yes, there is a lot of data in there, but with our solution, we try to offer them the possibility that if they hover over a customer, for example, they immediately get the data that they need and that they're not submersed in all the data that is floating around that customer. So if they're looking at inventory, a customer is putting down an order, they can easily check in what is their average order size, have they paid all their bills, etc., and they get that data immediately. So we're trying to make that process a little bit easier, but overall it is a very big challenge. If you look at the sales and operations planning process, for example, as well, what you see is a lot of companies are struggling with just getting the data together for that S&OP meeting. So a lot of people, they start a month ahead collecting the data in spreadsheets, etc. So by the time that meeting comes across, the data is outdated, it's error-prone because it's in spreadsheets, etc. So what we have developed is a solution that basically offers them a workflow to get that data real-time, that has checks to make sure that people have approved the data. So by the time that you get to that pre-sub meeting, you really have the right data. You can be sure that everybody has completed their tasks and that you can actually work from a basis and make decisions based on the data that's accurate.
Yet another key aspect of today's supply chains, and once again, I'm sure going forward in the future, is the cloud.
Correct.
How has the cloud affected IT in your space, and how do you expect it to continue to affect the supply chain going forward?
Well, cloud is obviously one of the biggest opportunities in the marketplace out there, and what we see is, especially for supply chain, a lot of customers are still a little bit skeptic, let's put it that way, with regards to security, because even for a sales and operations planning process, you put a lot of very sensitive data out there. So security is an absolute key piece. However, we do recognize that cloud is going to be the future for all enterprise solutions, including supply chain.
And enterprise resource planning as well. I guess that was a big moment when ERP went into the cloud, because for a while that was just too big a thing, I think, to be handled in that way. Now there's no problem?
Well, if whether there's no problem, that's a big thing. But it's developed a lot since a couple of years. It's a very fast-paced market. The offerings are out there, and it actually offers a customer the possibility now to go safely and securely into the cloud. That basically offers them a very fast ROI. It prevents them from having to upgrade and just work with the tools straight away. So it definitely has its benefits.
Would it be overstating to say that the supply chain of the future is in the cloud? Or will there still be some kind of a balance between that and client-based sorts of software?
I think you will see a balance in supply chain, but it will go more gradually, I think, than it has in ERP and supply chain. But supply chain in the future will definitely move to the cloud.
Okay, another thing we're talking about at this conference is supply chain excellence, which is a word that can be bandied about quite a bit without meaning, but I think we're finding meaning in it today and this week. What, in your opinion, does that mean, supply chain excellence?
I think supply chain excellence is a lot about optimization. What we're seeing is that there's a lot of customers that optimize in silos. And in true supply chain optimization fashion, it really is 1 + 1 = 3. So you really go from the end-to-end side and really work throughout all the silos in order to optimize your supply chain. It provides you with a much more agile and a supply chain that literally is better equipped to meet all those challenges that are out there.
Clearly, a supply chain excellence does signify end-to-end supply chain management, but within that whole universe of what we call the supply chain, where is it most difficult for clients to kind of assert management excellence? Is there any particular areas that your clients bring to you as their chief pain points out of all the solutions that you offer?
I think the core thing right now is analytics and data. Those are the key things that are brought across. And then if you look much more towards the whole, it's more the support as well within those processes, because often the business in itself will see the issues. But when, for sales and operations planning, for example, you cannot be successful if your leaders, if your CEO, for example, isn't supporting that process. So it's also driving the whole, the importance of the supply chain within the company. It's recognizing that part that's often a big issue as well.
To what extent do you see your client base still existing in siloed type organizations where they really don't talk to each other across these various functions?
Actually, more than you can imagine. We see that much more often than we actually care to see it. But we do try to help them and understand where to go and what kind of people to bring in order to make that process easier. Because supply chain is not just about technology, it really is also about change and changing the processes within a company.
Would you describe that as perhaps the biggest business process challenge that your clients face when you come in an engagement with them?
It's one of the biggest ones, absolutely, because supply chain, it's no longer just about production. It really is end-to-end, where you go from all the way from demand supply to wholesale and operations planning, all the way through to the warehouse and delivering it to the customer. And there's pressure across the board because their customers, their SLAs are much more heavier. There's very heavy fines when they don't meet them. But also on the production side, the supply side, you really need to make sure that it all runs, and it literally touches on all the different departments within a company now.
What's changing in this respect to what within the organizations, within the client base that you deal with? Who owns the relationship with you? Who is actually buying and procuring your software and working with you to implement it?
It really depends from solution to solution, to be honest with you. When we're looking in a supply chain execution side, literally, we often work with the person who's responsible for logistics or the VP of supply chain or operations. Sales and operations planning, obviously, again, we see very much, it depends very much on the maturity of the S&OP process within the companies, on who we deal with. It can be that the VP of supply chain owns that process. Often it's also the operations or financial person as well. And then for planning solutions, you'll see that it's owned by a supply chain manager or director, but that we really deal a lot with the planning teams as well, because they know the real business issues to move forward with.
And then finally, I'd like you to kind of put on your innovator's glasses and kind of give me a real sort of visionary view of where you think all this is going. What surprises does the future hold for us, do you think, in terms of the development of IT, the way it's applied, what clients are going to ask for you in the future? Just any of that. Tell me what really excites you about the future of supply chain.
I think what excites me right at this time is the technology. When we think about enterprise software or supply chain software, we think about those boring screens with just all these lines of data on there and that, here and there a graph. What we have looked at is literally work with our customers to understand what do they see as the biggest issue with their software. And actually, what we've come back with is today is literally a society of people. Today's generation is iPad people, Facebook people, Twitter people. So when you go from college and they move into the business world, they really expect to see something similar. And then they're faced with all these old-fashioned looking materials and they go like, no, we don't want to work with that. So what we've done and what the evolution of technology really just drives towards is we've actually pulled a new user interface, a very consumer-grade user interface it's very good to look at, it's user-friendly, it's easy to work with, and it really provides you with the data that you need right at that time on the dashboards. With our role-based, you get the data that you need. It's social collaboration as well. We're talking about Twitter. We've developed a tool that really provides social collaboration within those enterprise solutions so that you can immediately react when there's changes in the supply chain, when customers make demands, alerts and tasks. So it becomes very agile, very collaborative as well, and you really get everything that you need. So I love that aspect of putting today's Twitter, Facebook kind of culture into the tools of the future.
So the future, ERP, S&OP, SCM, CRM in a smartwatch, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Nathalie, thank you so much for giving us your vision of the future of the supply chain and your excitement about what's coming. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I've been speaking with Nathalie Regniers of Infor. Thanks very much for watching.